Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we're happy to greet all of you with our warm weather, melting snow, and I hope what you'll find is a very hospitable group of folks to hang around with for the next couple of days. My name is Rich Wagner. I currently serve as president of the American Technical Education Association and as president of Dunwoody College of Technology, your host institution for the next couple days. So we're very excited to have everybody here in our great state and our great city celebrating technical education, celebrating what I believe is the most important part of the higher education landscape, certainly making a difference in so many people's lives as we prepare them for jobs and careers and for the, as our founder once said in his last will and testimony, the better performance of life's duties. So it's my pleasure on behalf of the ATEA's Board of Trustees to welcome you all here. We have certainly want to thank Amatrol and Paul Perkins for being silver sponsors of the trade show. Paul, where are you at? So thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much to Amatrol. So thank you to the U.S. Senators. I want to clarify a point that may have came off there. I am not the mayor of Mendota Heights. Sandra Kressbach is the mayor of Mendota Heights. So if you are from Mendota Heights and you have some issues about potholes and snow plowing, see her. Please don't talk to me about those issues. But thank you to our U.S. Senators for their support and for you getting behind the work, the important work we do as American Technical Education Association. You know, one of our strengths, or many of our strengths, emit or come from the real urgency of the mission we perform. So what is ATEA? I really view ATEA as where our faculty and staff and administrators can come together and we as a whole can collectively think about how we educate the much needed, much in demand workforce of tomorrow. And what really makes this possible is the strength of our Board of Trustees. So the last thing I'm going to do before we serve dinner is introduce the board members that are present here tonight. And I'd like to start with our head table, where we have Mr. James King, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Tennessee College of Applied Technology and Tennessee Board of Regents, and he represents what is now the immediate past president or past president of the American Technical Education Association, as our immediate past president, Larry Mosier, had to resign because of family health issues that they were dealing with as a family. So James has agreed to serve as the much overdue and serving too long former president of the American Technical Education Association. Next to him is Dr. Paul Young, who's president of Northern Wyoming Community College District, and he serves as the ATEA vice president. Mr. Bob Wallace, who is Director of Finance for Tennessee College of Applied Technology, Tennessee Board of Regents, and ATEA Director of Finance. We have Dr. Harry Bowman, President Emeritus, Council on Occupation Education from Claremont, Florida. Thank you, Harry. We have Bethany Clem-Shockney, Dean of Workforce Development and Technical Business and Computer Information Systems at Calhoun Community College in Decatur, Alabama. We have Dr. Robert Dunker, where's Bob at? President Emeritus of Western Iowa Community and Technical College. Jane Hildebrand, Early Childhood Education Chair and Professor from Ivy Tech Community College in Kokomo, Indiana. Where's Jane at? Did she stand up? Brooks Jacobson, where's Brooks at? Brooks, who is the Robotics and Electronics Instructor at Lake Area Technical College. Dr. Keith McClanahan, Director of Advanced Technology and Allied Health Division at Arkansas State University, Beebe. Dr. Ron McCage, past Executive Director of the Career and Technical Education Consortium of the States from Georgia. Dr. Mike Myers, Dean of Professional, Technical, and Workforce Education, North Idaho College, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And for any Dunwoody staff that have met Mike, please, Monday morning, be in my office. We're going to have a debriefing of things that we need to talk about. Dr. Jim Sherrard, Chair of the Nuclear Programs at Three Rivers Community College in Norwich, Connecticut. Shelley Travis, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Services, Tennessee College of Applied Technology in Nashville. Paul Perkins, president of Amatrol and sponsor of tonight's vendor evening, so thank you very much for that, Paul. Our newest Board of Trustee, Mary Kay Bredesen, Executive Director of Center of Excellence in Aerospace and Advanced Materials from Everett, Washington. Thank you, Mary Kay, for stepping up to serve on the board. And arriving tonight, a little bit later tonight, will be Dr. Ron Langrel, who's president of Bates College in Tacoma, Washington. So that group really deserves a round of applause because they're the ones who really help keep this organization strong and thriving. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have dinner, and then we're going to have a great keynote speaker, and then tomorrow morning we'll start up at 8 o'clock with a group of entrepreneurs who graduate from technical education programs talking about the impact we all have as educators committed to technical education on multiple levels. You know, we impact our communities by graduating people who can serve the local workforces that need our graduates so bad. We serve our communities by graduating people that start companies and make a difference and an impact on the communities by hiring people and, you know, being philanthropists to the communities in which they live. But I think the most profound impact we have is on the individuals that come to us on a student basis whose lives are forever changed because of the role technical education plays in directing them into great jobs and great careers. And I'm just honored to be among a group of people who are committed to changing people's lives. It's such wonderful work we do. And it's so wonderful to finally see this great country understanding and appreciating the impact all of you have had on so many lives. So let's enjoy ourselves for the next couple days. I guarantee it's going to be warmer here by Friday by the time you leave. So enjoy the conference, have a great dinner, and we'll have the keynote speaker here in just a few minutes. Thanks for being here. Good evening again, everybody. Hope you're enjoying your meals. We're going to go ahead and push on with the program tonight. A couple of notes. We start off tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Mayor of Mendota Heights and the Executive Director of the American Technical Education Association, Dr. Sandra Kressbach. Sandra?
Thank you. It's an honor to be the Executive Director of the American Technical Education Association and to serve with this board and to serve this mission. This is an outstanding, as you know, mission, but this organization provides what I call Convene the Question. It brings together best practice across the country, across systems, across colleges, faculty to system leaders. I don't think there's a better organization out there. And we so appreciate you being here and being part of it. What I'm going to do is a few acknowledgments and then an overview of the conference and then introduce our keynote speaker. I want to first thank Katie Malone. She is the Dunwoody Chair. Katie, would you stand, please? She does just an outstanding job. And I'd also, I don't know if the committee is here, but there was a presentation committee, Leo Parvis, Jenny Saplis, Peter Rivard, Teresa Milligan. Would you stand, please? They did a wonderful job. Is Peter still here? Peter. And Peter also was in the band. They are the Shotgun Johnson and the Mississippi 7, and there were the Mississippi 4 tonight. You did a wonderful job. He was there with his daughter and 2 other musicians. So thank you, Peter. Uldrich.
So I know when most people hear my introduction, they could care less about the books I've written. They could care less what I did with the Navy. What they typically want to know is, well, what was it like to work for Jesse Ventura? And it just so happens I have a story about this. I was the head of the Office of Strategic Planning for the state of Minnesota. It was early on in the administration, and I was briefing him on emerging technologies, what was coming next. I get done with my presentation, and Ventura puts his hands behind his head, and he goes, Uldrich. He goes, knowledge is good. And I just blankly stare back at him. I mean, who can disagree with that statement, right? But then Ventura says to me, goes, well, do you know who said that? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not about to be outwitted by this guy, this former Bowl wearing all-star wrestler. So with some confidence, I said Socrates, and he gets this look of utter contempt on his face, and he leans forward, he puts his big meaty finger in my face, and he goes, "Uldrich, haven't you ever seen the movie Animal House?" So for those of you who can't remember the movie Animal House, at the beginning of the movie, there's a camera which pans the college campus, and there's a statue under which it said, "Knowledge is good." So I always tell people I worked for a governor who quoted Animal House for his political philosophy. But in that spirit that knowledge is good, really what I want to do for this presentation is introduce to you emerging technologies and add to your knowledge bank. But another thing that when people hear my bio, another common question is, well, what is it that a futurist does? And that's a great question, but rather than tell you what a futurist does, I want to show you what a futurist does. And I know that because many of you are teachers and instructors, you've probably already seen this video, but I'm going to show it to you again anyways. And what I want you to do is I want you to count the number of times people in the white shirt pass the basketball. It can either be a bounce pass or a chest pass. Whomever gets the correct answer will get a signed copy of my latest book, Foresight 2020. So does everyone understand what I'm asking? Count the number of times people in the white shirt pass the ball. Here we go. Okay, could I see a show of hands? How many people counted 15? Anyone count 15? Okay, some of you did. What about 16? More of you, congratulations. What about 17? 17, any other number? Okay, everyone who said 16, please stand up. 16 is in fact the correct answer. Now I'm going to ask you to remain standing. Unfortunately, I don't have books for all of you. So what I'm going to do here is only the people who are now standing can answer this follow-on question, but whoever gets it right, raise their hands first with the correct answer, will get the book. So of the people standing, who could identify 3 other changes in that video? There were 3 distinct changes. What about 2? Anyone see 2? Okay, what about the most obvious? And yes, sir. The gorilla. Congratulations. Afterwards, come on up, collect your book. There was a gorilla in the video. Could I just see a show of hands? How many other people saw the gorilla? Okay, so it looks like about 10% of you did, but 90% of you didn't. But even of those 10% who saw the gorilla, there were still a few other things that you missed. So let me just show you what else you missed. Here we go.
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
Oh, so I told you I was going to show you what a futurist does. Look, I gave all of you an incentive to focus on a very specific task. And in your day-to-day jobs and responsibilities, you're similarly incented to focus on specific responsibilities within your institutions. As a futurist, however, I have the luxury of stepping back and looking at the big picture. And the first thing I like to remind my audiences is there's this 800-pound gorilla in the form of new emerging technologies that's walking front and center into our lives. It's stopped right before us. It's beating its chest saying, I'm going to transform virtually every aspect of technical education. But not all of us see this because our attention is focused elsewhere. But beyond that, certain jobs and industries are fading away. It's kind of like the person in the black shirt just walking away. We don't see these changes until it's too late. But even beyond that, customer and student behavior is changing in some really subtle ways, and it's like the curtain changing colors. And what I hope to do in this presentation is just open your eyes and make you aware of the extraordinary changes that are happening today. But the other thing I want to do in this presentation, I want to help you think a little bit like a futurist. And this was a theme of a book I wrote a couple of years ago called Jump the Curve. And when I wrote this book, I came across a wonderful quote from Albert Einstein. And decades ago, he said to scientists and other technologists, he said, if you can't explain what you're working on to a 6-year-old child, you're a fraud. I thought, wow, that's a really good test. Just so happens, when the book came out, my son Sean was only 6 years old. I thought, oh, I want to see if he can grasp what I mean by jump the curve, because I need you to grasp this concept. And I didn't know how to do this, but one day it came to me. He came to me very excited. He'd lost his first tooth. I thought, oh, I'm going to teach my son how to jump the curve. So I said to him, imagine the tooth fairy comes to you this evening, presents you 2 different options for your teeth. And it is a fact, all babies have 20 teeth. Option number 1, tooth fairy is going to give you $5 per tooth. Now, I'm a really cheap guy, so I said, look, son, this is just a hypothetical example. I'm not telling you the tooth fairy is going to bring you $5 per tooth. But I go, that's one option. The second option is tooth fairy brings you a penny for your first tooth, 2 for your second, 4 for third. Your penny doubles 20 times. Which option are you going to take? Well, without batting an eye, he goes, I'm taking the $5, Dad. That'd be $100 in total. I go, okay, fair enough. Do you, however, know what your 20th tooth would have been worth? Sheepishly, he says no, and I go, well, as your dad, I'm about to tell you. It would have been worth $5,242.88. To which, like any 6-year-old, he goes, no way. As his dad, I said, yes way. But then I said, look, son, let's plot that penny out on a graph, doubling. Early on, the doubling looks insignificant. 2, 4, 8 cents. Doesn't really look like it's going anywhere that fast. But after just 20 doublings, that curve shoots up. So if he would have wanted to understand the implications of the tooth fairy's offer, he would have had to jump that curve. That's why he needed to know how to jump the curve. The reason you need to know how to jump the curve is because there are now 10 technological forces that are doubling anywhere from every 4 to 24 months. It is computer processing power, it is data storage, it is bandwidth. It's the sequencing of genes, it is advances in biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, 3D printing, sensor technology, and the collection of data. All of these trends aren't just creeping up linearly, they're shooting up exponentially. So the first thing, if we really want to start thinking about the future of our institutions, the future that our students are going to populate, what we have to recognize is we're just at the lower left-hand part of this curve today. Where we and our students are going to be in the not-too-distant future is a decidedly different place, and we have to start thinking about this future. Now, one of the points I want to make from this point forward, every technology I'm about to tell you isn't off in the future. Everything I tell you is here today. Our challenge is to understand how each and every one of these trends is going to get exponentially better. And now let me just start introducing you to some of the trends that are here today. How many of you are familiar with this technology? Wearable technology, it's Google Glass. These are glasses that you wear, and it is as though the computer screen is right in front of you. Now, I suspect that some of you are going, there's no way I'm going to be caught dead wearing something like that. Well, fair enough, but as a futurist, one of the things I like to do is challenge people's assumptions. And I'm going to do that with a question. How many of you happen to know what the fastest growing demographic in the video game industry is today? Any of you know? Might interest you to know it is people over the age of 70. And why is that? It's because Nintendo and other game manufacturers have made their technology so lightweight, so easy to use, so affordable, that yes, many of our parents and grandparents are now using this technology. My message to you is you might not think that you would ever wear Google Glass, but if it makes your life better or more intuitive, or you can do things in a fundamentally new way, I don't want to say all of us are going to be rocking this technology in a couple of years, but many of us and many of your students might be. And here's why. Let me just show you what we are already doing with this technology. The world's first surgery with a surgeon wearing Google Glass was performed just this past fall at Ohio State University, and here's what the surgeon was able to do.
As Kading performed surgery on the east side of Columbus, a colleague collaborated from his office across town. And on Ohio State's main campus, a group of medical students saw this historic event from a completely different perspective.
So the surgeon is already consulting with his colleagues and other experts on the other side of town, but there's no reason he couldn't do it or she couldn't do it from the other side of the world. They're using this technology to transform medical education. This is where we were in 2013. This technology is going to be a commercial product in 2014. And I know that Robbie Kendall Melton actually has a pair of Google Glass, and she's going to be talking about this tomorrow. But again, our challenge is to understand how these technologies are just going to get more affordable and how they're going to transform not just medical education, but a variety of others. Because let me show you what else we can already do with Google Glass.
A surgeon could potentially call up x-rays or MRI images of the patient, pathology reports, and reference material. The doctor can even talk live to colleagues or specialists via the internet anywhere in the world.
Regardless of what your students are working on in the future, their ability to pull up a schematic of an engine or a refinery plant, and have that information right there and begin accessing other experts who have dealt with similar problems is going to be here sooner than rather than later, and we have to start preparing our students for this world that we know is coming. Trend number 2, and I know that people are going to be talking about this, 3D manufacturing. How many of you are aware that Nike, just late last year, has now produced the world's first 3D printed shoe? Any of you, some of you are aware of that? What's fascinating to me is that this has reduced waste by 80%. Because it is printed layer by layer, there is nothing that isn't utilized. The environmental impact of this technology is absolutely extraordinary. But of course it's not going to stop there. Up in Winnipeg, Canada, they have already printed all of the exterior components of an automobile. But it's not even going to stop there. General Electric has said by 2017, so in just 3 years, they're going to be printing aircraft engine parts. And what's fascinating about the fuel nozzles that are being printed with this technology, they're going from 18 parts down to 1 part. The costs are, the savings are extraordinary, but it's not even going to stop there. Over in China, they already have a 12-meter 3D printer that is printing titanium wings and fuselage parts for aircraft engine parts. Folks, this is where we are in 3D printing today. The technology is only going to get better, more affordable, and the types of materials that we're going to be able to print with is going to continue to increase exponentially. And why do I say this? Just last year, NASA has already printed a fuel injection part that can withstand temperatures up to 1,000 degrees Celsius. Boston Consulting has said the potential for 3D manufacturing to bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S., we might be able to bring back 30% of the jobs that we had lost with this technology. That, to me, is absolutely extraordinary. But now, I want you to think about the future a little bit differently, because all of these technologies aren't just going to be created in their own individual silos, they're going to crash and converge into one another. How many of you know what this technology is? Some of you do. It's Oculus Rift, and if you read today's newspaper, you will have just learned that Facebook paid $2 billion for this company. This company wasn't even a company 20 months ago. It was just an idea in a 19-year-old's head. But they have taken it from that idea to a $2 billion corporation in a short period of time. And what I found fascinating, again, you can pick up today's Wall Street Journal. On page 1 is this quote from Mark Zuckerberg, and he said, "We're going to make Oculus Rift a platform for many experiences, including studying in classrooms, because what this technology is, it's a virtual reality goggle. These are goggles that you put on. Let me just show you what we're already doing with Oculus Rift. How many of you know who Elon Musk is? He's the CEO of Tesla, the electric vehicle company. Here's what they're doing with Oculus Rift today.
And then finally, we use the Oculus Rift, which is immersive virtual reality that actually tracks your head position, and you really are moving around the object. It feels like it's right there in front of you. Now let's use this for an actual component on the rocket, which is a cryogenic valve housing. You can really apply your intuition and take something from your mind to a physical object with far greater ease than we currently do. Now that we've gotten the object out of our head and into the computer, how do we get it out of the computer and into reality? So we're actually going to print this with a 3D laser metal printer.
You have an idea in your head, you can create a simulation of it, and then get a 3D design of it and print it. Again, this is where we are today, folks. You can't tell me that this isn't going to transform technical education and how many of your students are doing their jobs in the not too distant future, because it's already here today. Here's another way I want you to think about the future. If something doubles just 10 times, it's not 10 times as big, it's 1,000 times as big. So my son's 10th tooth, under that tooth fairy analogy, was only worth $5.12. 10 doublings later, though, 1,000 times bigger. And a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, Jack, we're not going to see 1,000-fold increase anytime soon. Well, don't be so sure. Here's why I say this. Just last year, Cisco came out with a report that said that mobile web video communication going to grow 250-fold in the next 2 years. The year after that, 500-fold. The year after that, in just 4 years, 1,000-fold increase. And I suspect, again, this is what Robbie is going to be touching on this and some other themes tomorrow as well. But how do we want to start thinking about this? Well, here's just one way to think about this. Tesco is a British grocery chain, and they're expanding internationally, and they specifically wanted to expand over in Seoul, South Korea, but they couldn't do it because land is really expensive. But they said, oh, mobile web is taking off, and what that allows us to do, and what they've now done, is they've created virtual grocery shelves on the walls of subway stations so that when commuters get off in the morning with their smartphones, they can literally grocery shop on their way to work. My point is, this is how a retailer is thinking about exploiting this new technology to do what? To reach out to existing customers in new, innovative ways, to reach out to new customers in some new ways, and to radically lower their costs of running facilities and warehousing things. But of course, it's not going to stop there. Over in the UK, there's already a mobile education platform called FutureLearn. And what they're using is this device to deliver education to where students learn. They're flipping the paradigm on its head, saying rather than make students come to our campuses, we need to figure out how to bring the campus and the coursework to them. And this is exactly what mobile web video communication is going to allow you to do. Because I know, like me, many of you had a big dinner. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in an attempt to keep you engaged in this presentation. Who could tell me the mathematical relationship between these numbers? 1,000, million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, could keep going up. There's some mathematical relationship. Anyone know? Yeah, each one is 1,000 times bigger. And remember, I said if something doubles 10 times, how much bigger is it? It's 1,000 times. So if a technology is doubling and we're in the thousands, but it's doubling, that means we're going to be in the millions in 10 years' time. If we're in the millions, we're going to be in the trillions. If we're in the trillions, we're going to be in the quadrillions. I'm now going to walk you through some 1,000-fold increases that we know are headed our way. But before that, I just want to step back 6 years in time. And 6 years ago, how many of us knew what apps were? None of us did because they didn't exist 6 years ago. Today, close to 1 million apps. It's a $25 billion a year global industry, and 500,000 people are employed in this industry that didn't even exist 6 years ago. So can we just recognize we've lived through some extraordinary change? It opens our minds to the possibility that we just might continue to live through some extraordinary change. And let me just tell you some of the 1,000-fold increases that are coming. I've written a couple of books on nanotechnology, and here's what you need to know about nanotechnology. 3 years ago, it was a $100 million a year global industry. Today, it's a $5 billion a year global industry, and one of the reasons why is because of new self-repairing materials such as Samsung just developed or came out with in this past December. Here's where we are with self-healing materials already.
In their video, they scratch the phone up and down on the back next to a regular backing. Then after 2 minutes of sitting, the G-Flex actually completely heals, almost, while the regular phone is, of course, still scratched. Now,
So that's pretty impressive, but many people estimate that nanotechnology-enhanced products and materials are going to increase to a $100 billion a year global industry by 2020. From 100 million to 100 billion, that's a 1,000-fold increase. That's walking into our lives like that gorilla, but many of us might not see it. But I'm here to tell you, advances in material science and nanoparticles are going to transform a lot of the industries that you're training your students for sooner rather than later. And I know that many of you already have nanoscience programs, but we're just at the tip of the iceberg. And here's why I say that. 10 years ago, in 2004, when my first book on nanotechnology came out, we had just discovered a new material called graphene. And here's what graphene is now being used to do.
And he just turned it on with this little piece of graphene. But the amazing thing is, it doesn't stop working. After charging for 2 or 3 seconds, he ran this light for over 5 minutes. I thought we have something very important. I thought the world changed at that point.
He thought the world would change. So I was telling you, I've written a couple of books on nanotechnology. I go, what the hell is he talking about? That does not seem that transformative to me. Well, to his great credit and to my great shame, he's jumped the curve. And here's what he thinks that graphene is going to allow us to do within the next couple of years.
Like electric vehicles. Now you pull into a gas station. Well, you'd pull into a charging station, and within a minute, it would charge up your car.
What if you could charge up an electric vehicle not in 4 to 8 hours as it currently takes, but in less than 30 seconds? Is that a game-changing technology? Absolutely. Any of you who are preparing students for the automotive industry, the possibility that we might go from 1% of all vehicles being electric to 10 to 25 to maybe even 50% isn't beyond the realm of possibility. And here's where I just want to give you a warning from history. To my knowledge, 8 years ago, nobody was talking about America being the largest net producer of energy in the world. And yet it is today, and it just happened last year. And why is that? It's because technological advances in horizontal drilling technology and fracking technology have changed the game in terms of natural gas, and that has had profound implications on the global economy. In many cases, we're now bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Why? To take advantage of low prices in natural gas. My message to you is we have to be aware of these new emerging technologies because they can change big industries in a short period of time, and the lives of our students and our economies could change sooner rather than later. Trend number 5, another 1,000-fold increase, only this time we're going to go from thousands to millions. The number of robotics that are being deployed in manufacturing settings, on battlefields and agricultural settings and hospitals is doubling every year. Today there are thousands of these devices, but if the number doubles every year for the next 10 years, we're going to go from thousands to millions. And let me just show you where, again, this is Tesla's new automotive manufacturing facility. Here's how they're using robotic technology.
We have about 160 robots, the latest technology you can find on the planet, that are able to do very diverse tasks.
So that's pretty impressive, but how many of you know what this technology is? It's called Baxter, and it's now available for $22,000, and it's being used by small and medium-sized manufacturers to do what? To remain competitive with low-cost labor abroad. In many cases, robotic technology is, again, helping bring jobs back to the U.S. A lot of people think, oh, robotic technology is going to put everyone out of work, and I don't think that that's how you should be thinking about it. We're going to work hand in hand with robotics in many cases to remain more competitive and to employ more people than we currently are. And we have to start thinking about preparing our students for this world that we know is coming, because it's coming fast. How many of you saw 60 Minutes right before the holidays and what Amazon is already doing with flying drone technology? So this is what they're doing. So they're already exploring the possibility of making deliveries using drone technology. Federal Express is doing the same thing. The agricultural industry is looking at using flying robotic technology to inspect crops, to deliver herbicides and pesticides. It's coming sooner rather than later. And the reason I say that, in January of this year, they just created something that is essentially the World Wide Web for robotic technology. That once one robot learns something, it can rapidly share that information and communicate with scores, hundreds, and thousands of other robots anywhere in the world. And how these robots are going to start working with one another is really going to be profound. But to show you how fast the field is going, how many of you know what this is? It's Google's self-driven robotic car, and it's now legal in California, Florida, Nevada, and Michigan is looking at legalizing it. I recently came across this video. This is someone getting into a self-driven car for the first time. I thought it was kind of interesting. I think you might get a kick out of it.
What?
It's driving itself.
Ah! Ah!
I show you that because in many ways I think that's exactly what the future is going to feel like. Just downright frightening to all of us at how fast it is coming. But my point is, Google has already demonstrated on close to 1 million miles of California freeways and roads that their technology has yet to get in an accident. I think we can safely assume robotic technology is only going to get better, faster, and more affordable. And as it does, it's going to follow that exponential curve up, and we need to be thinking about the implications of this sooner rather than later. And why is that? It's because just this past December, Google bought one of the most promising robotic companies called Boston Dynamics, and their whole purpose to get into the manufacturing sector. It has nothing to do with transportation right now. It's all about manufacturing. Trend number 6, the number of sensors, computer chips, radio frequency identification chips is doubling every year. But today there are millions of these sensors, but by the end of the decade, another 1,000-fold increase, billions of sensors. 5 years ago, we had the tragic bridge collapse just a couple miles from here over in Minneapolis. When that bridge was rebuilt in record time, it was embedded with 400 different sensors. Those sensors have essentially connected that bridge to the internet, and we are now harvesting that data to do all sorts of impressive things. We can monitor the maintenance of it. We understand if there is a problem looming before it ever occurs in the first place. But of course, this is just the start. What you're going to start hearing more and more is the term the Internet of Things. Cisco, General Electric have all said that by the 2020, so just 6 years, we're going to connect 50 billion physical objects to the internet. They think this is a $15 trillion, that's trillion with a T, business opportunity in the coming decade. Here's how Cisco has been trying to educate the public as to what the Internet of Things might allow us to do.
Trees will talk to networks. We'll talk to scientists about climate change. Cars will talk to road sensors. We'll talk to stoplights about traffic efficiency. The ambulance will talk to patient records. We'll talk to doctors about saving lives. It's going to be amazing and exciting, and maybe, most remarkably, not that far away.
Not that far away. Virtually whatever your students are working on, again, whether it's a refinery, whether it's an engine, whether it's an automobile, those parts are going to be connected to the internet. And as they are, we're going to come to a deeper understanding of how they're being used, what the opportunities for efficiency are. We're going to know that they're going to break down before they ever break down. This is the type of thing that we have to begin preparing our students to live in a world like that. Trend number 7, which I mentioned, is computer processing power. And I mention this because a lot of us like to think because we have smart tops, laptops, smart tablets that we've lived through the computer revolution. We're but a fraction of the way through the computer revolution. Here's how I want you to think about this. How many of you remember it was just 3 years ago, IBM's supercomputer went on to Jeopardy. Any of you remember this? Went on to Jeopardy, took on Ken Jennings, the all-time human champion, crushed him. Well, that was 3 years ago, and you think, well, that's just a game show. Well, let me now show you what, I didn't include this video clip, but Watson has recently been hired by the world's leading cancer facility to diagnose cancer. That's where we are today. And one of the reasons it can diagnose cancer is because that computer is already 1,000 times more powerful than it was just 3 years ago. This computer that I have up here, it's called Recon. It's going to be operational in 2020. It's going to be another 1,000 times more powerful than Watson is today. It's a 1,000,000-fold increase in just a couple of years. One of the reasons I mention this is one of the reasons why otherwise bright scientific and technical people miss the future is they fail to appreciate even our tools are getting exponentially more powerful. How can we design the next nanomaterial? Well, we can do it on machines like this. We can simulate things in powerful new ways, and this is facilitating and fueling a future that is coming down upon us very quickly. But here's another way I want you to think about this. Could I just see a show of hands? How many of you still have on your possession the now tragically outdated iPhone 4S. Some of you still have that in your pocket. All right, no great shame in that. It only came out 18 months ago, right? But when it came out 18 months ago, the latest, greatest advance on it was what? It was Siri, artificial intelligence. You can now ask your phone a question, and it gives you an answer. Still makes a few silly mistakes, but for the most part, it does a pretty good job. Well, here's what you have to realize. As a result of computer processing power getting 1,000 times more powerful, more sophisticated algorithms being behind all of that processing power, Siri and its successors, Google now and others, are going to get 1,000 times smarter in the coming decade. So what might this mean? Well, here's what it means. It means we're going to go from a world where we ask our phones questions and get answers to a world where our phones and our devices and our technologies know us so well that they tell us things that we need to know before we even know to ask the question. And if you don't believe that, watch this.
What could this tell me about impending trouble?
Well, we're working on a project that will take a nanosensor in the bloodstream that is smaller than a grain of sand, and it will pick up a signal when you have cells that are coming off, shed into the bloodstream, coming off from the artery lining, which is the precursor to a heart attack. And then you will get on your phone a special heart attack ringtone.
A special heart attack ringtone! Now, I don't know about you, but if I get a damn heart attack ringtone, I'm probably going to have a heart attack. But my broader point is, doesn't that sound insane? And maybe from today's perspective, it does. But this fellow, and his name is Eric Topol, his understanding of advances in nanotechnology, computer processing power, and sensor technology tell him that that vision isn't off in the far, fuzzy future. It's just a couple of years away. And we're here in the Twin Cities, home to Medtronic, a very sophisticated, technologically savvy company, but they make billions of dollars doing what? Treating heart disease after it has occurred in the first place. I think most of us can agree we would prefer not to have to use a defibrillator in the first place. And this is exactly where the future is pointed towards. And device manufacturers and people who are thinking about being employed in that industry have to understand this is where the future is headed. Because Intel, Qualcomm, virtually every other computer company has said the future of the computer chip isn't just in the smartphones and computers, it is inside you. What they want to do is use computer sensing technology to detect a heart attack or cancer before you're ever aware of it and allow you to start taking preventative action. So what does all this mean? All of this 1,000-fold increase? Well, here's one way I want you to think about it. As soon as you recognize what's wrong with this card, raise your hand. Some of you, I always know who the gamblers are. No, I'm just kidding. Keep looking at it. There's something blatantly, patently wrong with it. But in the interest of time, someone who spotted it immediately tell me what it is. That's right. It's a spade. It should be black. But in this case, it's red. But now here's what's curious. If before I ever put this photo up, if I just came up to you and said, would you recognize a red spade? Most people go, oh yeah, that'd be so weird. I'd pick up on it instantly. But that's not what happened for the overwhelming majority of you. And it takes most people about 60 seconds to recognize that's what's wrong with the card. And here's why. When our way of viewing the world has been so conditioned to see something one way, we've always seen spades as black. So powerful is that old paradigm that even after this new change is staring us in the face, we don't see it. I'm here to tell you that the metaphor is this. Your world, the world of technical education, has already changed. And it is as odd as a red spade, and you might not be seeing it yet. But as leaders in your industry, you have to pick up on this change because it is coming sooner rather than later. And let me relate this to the 8th trend, and that is the amount of data we are collecting is another exponential trend. And this is changing business models in some profound ways. And let me just give you one example, and this just comes from Amazon. Again, it was from 60 Minutes right before the holidays in December.
We have computers and algorithmic work that tells people the areas of the building that have the most space to put product in that's coming in at that time.
Amazon has become so efficient with its stacking, it can now store twice as many goods in its centers as it did 5 years ago.
Twice as good as they were 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, I suspect Amazon was already pretty good. But the world, the global supply chain, the manufacturing industry, if you're not squeezing out every efficiency, you're not going to be long for this world. And here's why I say this, because here's what Amazon wants to do in the not too distant future.
Anything you want on Earth, you're going to get from us.
Anything you want on Earth, you're going to get from us.
That's where we're headed, I believe.
Anything, not just books, not just lamps, anything on this planet. Why? Because they're understanding how to harvest data. They're understanding about your preferences, your purchasing behaviors. They're going to make connections about you that you're not even aware of, and they're going to present you. They already are with books and movies saying, oh, if you liked X, you might like Y. Well, they're going to start doing that with a wide variety of other things. The world is changing, and those companies that don't have a big data mindset are already behind the curve. Another trend that is growing exponentially, this goes by the term shared economy or collaborative consumption. Many people now, because they have social networks and mobile devices, what are they doing? How many of you are familiar with Uber? Some of you, any of you familiar with Uber? You can now call up a person who has room in their car, and they act as a private taxi. And this is already, you could get one here in St. Paul, cities all around the world. But it's not going to stop there, because many people are also sharing the rooms in their house. How many of you are familiar with what Airbnb is? Any of you know? So Airbnb, if you have an extra spare bedroom, you can rent it out on the internet, and millions of people are doing this. Here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, every night, 500 people, instead of staying at hotels like this, are staying in strangers' homes. This is a threat to not only the hotel industry, but if you're preparing workers for the construction industry, the number of hotels we might need in the future could drop significantly. Uber and other advances in technologies like that might mean the number of automobiles, the number of taxis we need in the future might drop. And so as we have fewer cars on the road, there might be a need for fewer auto mechanics. You might not think that this trend affects you, but I would argue that it does. So those are just a couple of examples, but now I want to just go a little bit deeper into this idea that it's not just enough to be aware of these trends. We also have to challenge our assumptions. And to demonstrate what I mean by this, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to ask you a very simple question. What I want you to do is I want you to turn to your neighbor and answer for your neighbor this very simple question. What two colors are the yield sign? Go ahead, tell your neighbor. What two colors are the yield sign? Okay, I heard the answer. Someone said yellow and black, and if you said yellow and black, congratulations. That was the correct answer up until 1971. The yield sign has been red and white The yield sign has been red and white since Richard Nixon was in the White House. Now I'm sure somebody's going, no way, that is not true. That is, yes, as a matter of fact, it is true. The first yield sign you see after leaving the Crowne Plaza Hotel will be red and white, and curiously enough, every other one all the way home will be red and white. Inevitably, I know someone at the break will want to come up to me and say, well, in my rural area, Tennessee, they're still yellow and black. No, they are not. They are not yellow and black anywhere in North America, and they have not been for decades. So So convinced are people that there are yellow and black yield signs. At the end of my presentation, which I will make available for free, and this entire presentation is being videotaped, but I'm happy to share it with all of you, I will put up my email address, and if you're absolutely convinced there's a yellow and black yield sign, I strongly encourage you to snap a photo and send it to me. I've been doing this for 6 years, asking this question, and nobody has ever yet sent me a yellow and black yield sign. So, here's the metaphor I'm trying to make with this. Look, there's no great harm that you didn't know yield signs were red and white, unless for the last 43 years you haven't been yielding at these signs. But my point is this, is that, look, it is a fact that years ago yield signs were yellow and black. And that's what many of us learned, and textbooks were outdated for a couple of years. But the problem is that old, crappy information has just stayed stuck in our head, even in the face of overwhelming visual evidence to the contrary. We've been driving by these signs for decades. The metaphor is this. I can't tell you exactly what it is that you learned early in your academic or professional career that was true yesterday. But what I want you to do is this. As if you did get this question wrong, what I'd like you to do is the next time you see a red and white yield sign, which will be the next time you see a yield sign, I just want you to think to yourself, how is my world changing and I'm just not seeing it? If nothing else, use this as a reminder to stay humble to the idea that not everything that sits inside our head is necessarily true. Could have been true yesteryear, but it's no longer true today. So now, those of you who said yellow and black, I'm not done with you yet. If you're a little curious as to what your brain looks like, well, here's what your brain kind of looks like. That's what your brain kind of looks like. So, looked good back in the day, but I think we can all agree it might be time for a little mental wardrobe update. So again, there's no great harm in not knowing the yield sign, but I do want to put this in some sort of contemporary context. And I'm almost 50 years old, and I talk to a lot of people about social media and the advances there, and they go, social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all just a colossal waste of time. All those sites should just merge into one super time-wasting website called UTwitface. It's like, I don't have time for all of this nonsense. But if that's your impression of social media, you might need to have a little humility, and you might need to let go of some of your old assumptions. And by way of visual metaphor, here's what I mean. I'm going to step back about 25 years ago. And 25 years ago, this fellow was given a then new technology. He thought he understood how to use it, but let's just watch what happens. So I hope we can all agree, look, if you don't understand a new technology, you might mistreat it. And I suspect a little bit of that is happening with social media. But if that analogy didn't work for you, let's step back a little further in time and let's watch what happens here. So my point is this. Any of you who are convinced that social media is just this colossal waste of time are doing the equivalent of looking at this new technology and just dismissing it, not understanding how to harness its true potential. But what isn't so funny is that other people are figuring out how to harness its potential. How many of you are familiar with Udacity? Massive open online course university. 2 years ago they just started, but last year they said, you know what, we're no longer going after higher education. You know where the real opportunity is? Technical education. And they have just started something called the Open Education Alliance. And they are working hand in hand with businesses. And I'm not going to read this whole quote, but their whole goal is to bring cutting edge and relevant post-secondary education to those companies' employees. The world is changing, and they're figuring out how to harness all of these new platforms. So that to me is not such a laughing matter that all of us have to step up our game and prepare to be competitive in this new world. But I just came across this slide, but I talk a lot about unlearning, and I talk a lot about exponential growth. And as I said, all of these trends are growing exponentially. But the problem is, for the last 30 years, even though they've been growing exponentially, that curve has essentially been flat. And that's the world we've learned a lot in. But now, as a result of all of these trends, we're going to have to unlearn a lot, and we're going to have to figure out how to relearn how to remain competitive in this new exponential economy. Now, let me just wrap up with a couple of things, and I want to make another metaphor. So to do this, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up. And what I want you all to do is I want you all to watch me as closely as possible and do exactly as I do, okay? If you have arthritis, you're exempt from this exercise. But if you don't, you have to do it. So everyone put your hands up. Put your hands out just a little bit. Clap them together. Flip them over. Everyone take your right hand, put it over your left. Okay, everyone, this is your right hand. Just checking. And now put your right thumb under your left. And now if you are dexterous enough, interlace those fingers, okay? And now lower your hands a little bit. Now if you're even more dexterous, I want you to tap those index fingers together, okay? So, were all of you watching closely? Because if all of you were watching closely, every single one of you should be able to quickly, simply, and elegantly, and without moving your shoulders at all, rotate those fingers 180 degrees to the top. How many of you can quickly do that? Or are many of you somehow suspiciously locked up, and you would have to go all the way around? All right, have a seat. I'm going to show you what just happened there. And I know if I don't show you, half of you are going to be under the table for the next couple of minutes, like, how did that guy do that? I'm going to show you the trick, and then I will explain why I do it. So you can go back and you can do this to your colleagues. You can go to the bar this evening, and someone who didn't attend this, you can win a cheap, easy drink off them. But you say, watch me as closely as possible and do exactly as I'm going to do. So you say, put your hands up. Put your hands out, clap them together, flip them over, take your right hand, put it over your left. Everyone does that right, but here comes the trick. You go, no, your right hand. 99.9% of all people follow that hand. That gives you the opportunity to flip your hand that way. Very few people see it, but that allows you to do that. But if you don't see it, you're like, what? How did you do that? Do it again. You'll do it again, they still won't see it. But the metaphor is this. I'm hoping after this presentation you're going to say to yourself, well, that was a good presentation. That opened my mind to the trends that are transforming tomorrow. I fear, however, what's going to happen is most of you are going to go right back to your day-to-day job, and you're going to focus on what you have always focused on. What I'm trying to implore upon you is that your world is constantly changing, and it's going to change again tomorrow. And as leaders in your industry, in your institutions, you have to give yourself permission on a regular basis to step back, to read, think, and reflect on how your world is changing. Because if you don't pick up on these changes, what happens? You're going to end up locked up and not prepared for the future. But if you do pick up on the changes, in time you're going to be flexible, adaptable enough to steer your institution into the future. So if nothing else, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I want you to give yourself permission on a regular basis to step back, to think, to reflect on how your world is changing. Because there's going to be something else on the front page of the Wall Street Journal tomorrow that directly affects you and your industry. And one of the actions I encourage everyone to do is to take a think week. And I can already hear a lot of people in the room that are thinking to themselves, well, who does this guy think he is? I'm a busy person. I don't have time to take a week just to think. But then I want you to think about that statement. Essentially what you are saying, if that's what you are saying, you're saying you don't have and you can't find 2% of your time to think about the future. Well, if you're not thinking about the future, who exactly is? And if a week is too much, I don't care how you break it down, an hour a week, 12 minutes a day, whatever. As a leader, I would argue this is, if not your most important responsibility, it's certainly in the top 2 or 3. and start figuring out how to do it. And let me just give you a couple of great resources on a daily basis. I read MIT's Technology Review. I can almost guarantee you, every day they send you 3 to 5 articles just on how fast the world is changing. You will find on a daily basis an article that directly affects your institution and your students. And you can read these articles in just a couple of minutes. Another great resource, how many of you know what the British magazine The Economist is, or are familiar with it? Great magazine, but 4 times a year they come out with an edition called the Technology Quarterly Review. For my money, they and their writers and editors do the best job of looking out over the near-term horizon and saying, here's what's coming, folks, better start thinking about it. So if nothing else, look at those 2 resources. And let me just give you a couple of things that I've been thinking about. And any of you who are in the manufacturing industry, I just came across this video 2 weeks ago. This is a new 3D printing technology, but it doesn't look like your traditional 3D printer. They are now building materials with no external supporting structure with steel, stainless steel, aluminum, bronze, copper, all sorts of things. Is that going to change the manufacturing industry? Is that going to change how welders do their job, the number of welders we might need? Absolutely. And this is coming out of a lab in Amsterdam. This is here today, folks. We need to be thinking about how these and other trends are transforming our world. Another trend I want you to think about, this wasn't in today's paper, but it was in yesterday's paper. How many of you saw that the former, was he the dean of Yale? President of Yale has now crossed to the other side, and he is heading up Coursera, which is a massive open online course. The world is changing. When they're getting people from the traditional educational establishment to say this is a really powerful platform to transform and educate people around the world, watch out. I tell you what, in the interest of time, I'm going to go over a couple of these slides. I'm happy to do it a little bit later, but what I want to do here is just wrap up with this last analogy. And if any of you saw any of those slides, I'm happy to talk to you individually afterwards about the trends that I was elaborating on there. But I want to try and sort of tie all of this together, and I want to give you a way to think about the future. And I'm going to give away another book. This is a copy of my book, Higher Unlearning, to whoever can get the answer to this question. So what I want you to do is I want you all to think of a lake that you are familiar with, okay? And those of you who are from Minnesota, let's just say it's June and the lakes are finally unfrozen. But on this lake, and your lake can be any size. If it's a big lake or small lake, it doesn't matter. But if it's a big lake, on the first day of June, there's a big lily pad on the lake. If it's a smaller lake, the lily pad will be slightly smaller. But every day in June, this lily pad doubles. So on June 2nd, there are 2, but on the 3rd, there would be 4th. The next day, there would be 8. Then the day after that, 16, 32, 64, it keeps on doubling. And then on the last day of June, the whole lake is then covered with lily pads. Can everyone kind of picture this exponential growth? Okay, so here's the question I'm going to give the book to whoever gets the answer within 1 percentage point. On day 20, so 2/3 of the way through this doubling exercise, what percentage of the lake do you think would be covered? And if you want to just guess, just shout out your answer. 10%? No. 50? No. 50? 40? No. 33? No. 100%? No. 7? No. 18? No. Who said 4? It's closer, but no. Who said 2? Closer. 1. Who said 1? Congratulations, Bob. You are within 1 percentage point, but you're still a little high. Do you happen to know the more precise answer? 0.1. 1/10 of 1%. And you're like, what? You just spent the last 45 minutes telling me how fast exponential growth is growing, and you're telling me the lily pads only cover 1/10 of 1%? Yes. In fact, this is exactly what I'm telling you, because what else did I tell you? If something just doubles 10 more times, and that is exactly what will happen under this scenario, how much bigger does it get? 1,000 times. So here's what happens. By day 25, we're just a little over 3%. Not till day 29 that we finally get just over 50. But baby, once over 50, the whole thing is covered the next day. Why do I tell you that? Well, I suspect some of you might be thinking to yourself, well, Mr. Future Man, if the world's changing as fast as you say it is, how come my world feels pretty much the same? My message to you is this. These trends have in fact been doubling. What you have to appreciate, we're just at day 20. The really big change for our institutions, our students, and our worlds is just ahead of us. This is the future we have to be preparing ourselves and our students for, because it is coming. But I know I've just dropped a big bomb on a lot of you. Probably want to rush to the bar. But I want to give you a little reason to be optimistic, and I want to, and this should give you reason to be optimistic. We've already lived through this, and I'm going to prove it to you. How many of you can remember the hit movie, probably came out about your 25th anniversary, or no, the 25th anniversary of this conference, the 75th anniversary of Dunwoody, but Wall Street. How many of you remember that movie? Michael Douglas played Gordon Gekko. He's this high-powered Wall Street guy. 25 years ago, they showed him using a specific technology to demonstrate he's a titan of capitalism. Any of you remember what that device was? That's right. It was that bad boy. That was the Motorola Dynatec 8000X. Doesn't that just reek of power and prestige? And 25 years ago, that device cost $5,000 and it only belonged to the elite. Let's fast forward to a couple of years ago. This is just 3 years ago. This is a real photo from Wall Street. It's an unemployment line, unfortunately. But if you look closely, 3 years ago, what did every unemployed person have? Cell phone. But it wasn't just a cell phone. It was probably a smartphone. You could access the internet. You could social network on it. You could store every song you ever purchased. You could produce a movie on it. Now with Siri, you can ask it all sorts of questions. So a demonstrably more powerful tool at a fraction of the cost. 25 years ago, phones belonged to less than 1/10 of 1% of the population. And what has happened in the last couple of years? Like that lily pad, and this is exactly what the other keynote speaker is going to be talking about tomorrow, they have exploded out. And some point in 2014, there are going to be more smartphones on the planet than there are people. That is absolutely extraordinary. And it is already transforming commerce, education, and health. This whole theme of mobility, it's here today, but we're just at day 20. But another thing I want you to think about is every technology I told you about today, robotic technology, 3D printing technology, advances in nanotechnology, I want you to think of them as all being at Michael Douglas's cell phone stage. Each and every one of these trends is only going to get better, faster, and more affordable. And as they do, they're going to explode out and transform the world around us. Homes are becoming smarter. 10 years ago, Bill Gates retrofitted his home, cost him with smart sensors, cost him $1 million. Today, you can go to Home Depot and buy Nest for $250. It essentially does the exact same thing. What cost $1 million 10 years ago, you can now do for $250. Solar technology, getting better, faster, more efficient. It's going to transform the energy equation. And if solar doesn't do it, fuel cell technology is going to follow this exact same pattern. The world is changing at warp speed. But I know, if I've done my job correctly, I hope to have half scared all of you with the pace of change that is coming, but also half excited you. But I really want you to focus on the excitement. And I love this quote from Peter Drucker, who years ago he said, "The best way to predict the future is just to create it yourself." These trends, these tools, these technologies are real, but the future is only going to be created as a result of the work that you and your institutions and your students are doing. And if you embrace all of this change, the future we're all going to be able to create for ourselves, our country, and our communities is going to be absolutely extraordinary. So thank you for everything that you do, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll take questions individually afterwards during the session. So thanks, Sandra. And those of you who are convinced there's a yellow and black yield sign somewhere lurking in your community, there's my email address, so just send it to me.
Thank you, Jack. Let's give him another round of applause. I'm going to have to check those yield signs in Mendota Heights because I thought they were yellow and black. This group is well positioned and has been identifying trends and meeting them. I think technical education is very much about spotting the trends and moving with it. I think our program tomorrow is going to address many of these. If I were to say what tracks we have, there's certainly professional development, there's soft skills meeting technical skills, that's another whole trend. Even though there might be some sort of delivery, there is still this need for the soft skills as well as the technical skills. Would be a track that we would call Standard Practice 2015. And there's also a track we'd call Push the Envelope. So we are well positioned, we always have been, and we will have a hot breakfast starting here at 7, going to 7:45 with the panel starting at 8. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.